3 days before Thanksgiving, my mother sent me a message. Maybe it's better if you don't come this year. I stared at the text for a moment, wondering if she was serious. Unfortunately, I already knew the answer. Over the past few years, family gatherings had slowly turned into uncomfortable competitions about money, careers, and success. And in my family's eyes, I always seemed to lose. My older sister Megan had married into a wealthy family. Her husband Tyler worked as an executive at his father's company, and his parents loved to talk about investments, profits, and real success. Every holiday, dinner felt more like a business meeting than a family gathering. People compared houses, cars, and job titles. And when it came to me, the conversation usually ended quickly. What do you do again? Tyler asked me last Thanksgiving. I run a small company, I said. He laughed immediately. A small company, he repeated. So basically a startup that doesn't make money yet. A few relatives chuckled politely. My father even shook his head slightly. You should have taken that corporate job offer years ago, he told me. I didn't argue. I never did, because explaining the truth always seemed unnecessary. 5 years earlier, I had started a technology consulting business with 2 friends from college. In the beginning, it was exactly what everyone assumed: small, unstable, and risky. We worked long nights, handled tiny contracts, and barely paid ourselves anything. But slowly things changed. 1 client turned into 5. 5 turned into 20. Soon we were working with companies far bigger than we ever expected. Eventually, my partners decided to move on to other projects. I bought their shares and kept growing the business. Within a few years, we had offices in 3 cities and a team of over 100 employees. But my family never noticed, mostly because they never really asked. So when my mother texted me saying I should skip Thanksgiving, I wasn't exactly shocked. What surprised me was what happened 2 days later. My phone rang. It was my sister Megan, and her voice sounded very different than usual. Hey, she said carefully. Hey. So, Tyler was talking about your company earlier. I raised an eyebrow. That's new. There was a strange pause. Then she said something that made me sit up in my chair. He looked it up online. Another pause. And now he's asking why you never told anyone that you own it. For a moment, I didn't answer. Megan was still on the phone, waiting. You're still there, right? She asked. Yeah, I said calmly. I'm here. So is it true? She asked. What exactly? That you own the company Tyler found. I leaned back in my chair. That depends. I replied. What company did he find? She quickly said the name. It was mine. The exact name of the consulting firm I had built over the last 5 years. So, she pressed. Yes, I said simply. Silence filled the line. When Megan finally spoke again, her voice sounded completely different. Why didn't you ever tell us? I almost laughed. You never asked. That's not fair, she said. Isn't it? Another pause followed. Then I heard Tyler's voice faintly in the background, asking something. Megan covered the phone for a moment before speaking again. Tyler says your company works with some really big clients. Some, I admitted. He also says your company revenue is really high. I didn't respond because Tyler had probably seen the public numbers already. And he says the founder's name on the website is yours. She added carefully. That's because it is. More silence. Finally, Megan sighed. Well, Mom and Dad didn't realize that. That doesn't surprise me. They thought you were still running some small startup. That's what everyone assumed. She hesitated before asking her next question. So, are you still coming to Thanksgiving? I raised an eyebrow. Didn't Mom say there wasn't room for me? Yeah, about that, Megan said awkwardly. I could almost hear her choosing her words carefully now. Things might have changed. How? Well, Tyler thinks it would be good if you came. I smiled slightly. Tyler suddenly wanted me there. Interesting. Why? I asked. Another pause. Then Megan said something that explained everything. Because the company Tyler works for, she stopped for a second, is actually one of your clients. Now, it was my turn to stay silent. Thanksgiving dinner was very different that year. When I walked into my parents' house, everyone suddenly seemed unusually polite. My mother hugged me longer than usual. "I'm so glad you came," she said quickly. My father shook my hand like we were business partners instead of family. "Good to see you," he added. Even Megan looked slightly nervous. But the biggest change was Tyler. Last year he had laughed at my small company. This year he stood up from the table the moment I walked in. "Hey," he said, forcing a friendly smile. "Good to see you." "Good to see you too," I replied calmly. Dinner started, and for the first 20 minutes, everyone carefully avoided talking about work. But eventually Tyler couldn't help himself. "So," he said casually, "your company is doing pretty well these days." "It's growing," I answered. He nodded slowly. "My firm has been working with your consulting group for a while now." "I know." The table went quiet. Tyler shifted slightly in his chair. "Well, maybe sometime we could talk about expanding that partnership." I took a sip of water before answering. "Maybe." My father looked between us, clearly trying to understand the situation. "Wait," he said, "your company works with Tyler's company." Tyler nodded. "Yes." Then he added something that finally made the entire table go silent. "Actually, his company is one of the firms that approves our contracts." My father blinked. "Approves them?" Tyler gave a small, uncomfortable smile. "Yeah." Then he glanced at me before finishing the sentence. "So technically, he's the one who decides if we keep the deal." For the rest of the night, nobody joked about my small company again. And Tyler didn't realize that until tonight. She finished quietly. I smiled to myself. So that's what this was about. My family hadn't suddenly missed me. They had just realized something important. At the Thanksgiving table this year, the least successful person in the room was actually the one signing the contracts. That Thanksgiving changed something in my family, not because of the money and not because of the business, but because for the first time, they realized how wrong their assumptions had been. For years, they had judged success by appearances, big titles, loud confidence, and expensive lifestyles. Meanwhile, the person they ignored the most had been quietly building something real, something stable, something valuable. After dinner, my mother apologized for the message she sent earlier that week. My father admitted they hadn't paid enough attention to what I had been doing. Even Tyler seemed different, more careful with his words. But the truth was, I didn't need their approval anymore. I had built my life without it. And that was the real lesson I took from that Thanksgiving. Sometimes the people who underestimate you the most are simply the ones who never bothered to truly see you. And success doesn't need to be announced loudly. Sometimes the strongest position in the room belongs to the person who never had to prove it